Hello and welcome to the second part of Angular 2 forms. In fact, Angular 4 forms. So now it's not Angular 2 anymore. So Angular 4 forms. So basically, if you go to the documentation, you can see that there are a few ways by which you can create forms. Now, in the previous video, we saw what is user inputs. Now we're going to look into template-driven forms. Now, this is one way of creating forms in Angular. This is not my preferred way of creating forms because this has a lot of timing issues and stuff like that. So, but this is useful in some scenario. So let's have a look into template-driven forms. Before we start looking into template-driven forms, let me inform you that there is another way by which you can create forms, and that's called as reactive form. Then there is also another way called dynamic forms. So just before we start, let's understand that there are three basic way of creating forms. That's the template driven forms, reactive form, and dynamic forms. I would say that dynamic forms and reactive forms are almost the same thing, but let's for the time being consider this as different. Okay, now before we start off with the code, let me inform you that I have installed Angular material into this project. So you will be using that. If you are not familiar with Angular material, then I have another series on Angular material, so you can have a look into that. I mean, the basic idea is that for the design purpose, we have Angular material installed. So you import Angular material module and use them as you need. In the documentation of Angular, you can see that they use Bootstrap. I think Angular material is much better than Bootstrap, so I prefer using Angular material. I mean, it's up to you whether you want to use Angular material or Bootstrap. So that's it. Let's dive into some code. Now if you look into the code, you can see that I've already imported Angular module and Angular input module and Angular button module. So basically it will create beautiful buttons for me and beautiful input elements. This is the one that we had in our previous video. We'll just remove that. Okay, the first thing is to create a form. So I'll open and close the form tag. Now I have to create input elements inside that form. So let's create that. Okay, so now we have our input element. Now if you're wondering what mat form field is, it's basically Angular material element. So you have to wrap the input field with mat form field. Basically it styles your input element, and it does a lot of other things which we'll see as we move forward with this video. So placeholder will just give it as name, and we'll just remove the value for now. We'll copy this and also create something like email, and we'll save it and we'll run this on the browser. We'll see how that looks. So this is how it looks. I don't see style coming in, so let's add a default theme. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a material website, material.angular.io, and then go to theme your components. I'll click on that and I'll be taken to the theme page. If I scroll down, I can see that there is this import of theme. I'm going to use deep purple theme, copy that and paste it into my style.css page, save it, and wait for the form to reload. And now I'll have beautiful looking forms. Input element, as you can see, it looks really good. So this is what we want. Now the form fields are actually aligned in a straight line, so I'll just give a class here, and so that the form fields just is not aligned in one line, and it will just go break and be listed as two different lines. So I'll create a class called full width, and give a width of 400 pixel, and I'll give a clear property to it, and I'll clear both the sides and save this, and this should put our form fields one below the another. And the next thing is to have a button, so I'll just create a new button here. So button. Okay, so I'll give the same class which is full width to button also, so that the button looks wide. I'll save this, and form should look like this. So we have our forms ready now. Okay, so now our forms look good. Now let's wrap our forms inside a card so that it looks it looks like as if it's a separate entity. So I'm going to go into Angular material and click on cards, and then so copy this mat card as the element that I want. So I'll create a mat card and then wrap our form inside mat card. I'll just align this so that it looks good in the code. Now nothing changed. The reason is because we haven't installed or imported the card module, so I'll import that mat card module and import that into the imports array, copy and paste it there, save it. Let's wait for this to reload. Okay, so it's reloading. You can see that there is a box. Now, so I'm making slight changes in the form elements, like it's going to be username, email, and password. So those are the fields that we require from the user. Okay, so we're going to create a new file called user.ts. This is going to be the model. So basically, this is the model user.ts. Now I'm not super impressed with the way we structure this whole application, but since this is for the sake of tutorial, I'm not going to change the structure. So the user model is nothing but a class, and it has a user class, and then it has a constructor. Okay, so the constructor has a few params. Basically, those are form elements. Public name, which is a string, public email, again string, public password, that's again a string. I've also added an age just to show that this age is it's not a mandatory thing, so you can, even if that doesn't come as a parameter, it's okay, it won't complain because we have added that as not a mandatory field. Now let's import our model into our component class. So import, the name of the model should go here from the /user. Once we import this, we can create an object of that model inside our component class. So the way I'm going to create that object is by creating a public variable called users, and that is of type user, and it's basically an object of a user. So new user, first it is the name, the second is the email ID, and then I have the password. So password, I'll give it as something like some random number or something like that. 1 2 3 would be good. And then age, so I'll give the age also here, and I'll try to bind this with the view. So I'm going to use ng model here to bind this to the view. Let's create that. Ng model equals user dot name. Okay, I'll copy this and add those things to the other form elements. So this should be email, this should be password, and this should be age. So once I've done this, the next thing is to go and see how my forms look. So I've an error here. So this error basically says that ng model isn't a known property of ng input. So we are missing something here. So it's just that we haven't imported Angular form module into our application. So once we import form module, input should handle ng model. Now we are going to import the form module into Angular project. So basically it's going to be import from Angular forms, and then this is going to be form module. I'll copy that and paste it into the imports array so that we have form module there. We'll save it and then go to our application and wait for this to rerun. It usually takes some time once you import a new module, so let's wait for that. Yeah, now it's working. Now we have another error. So this error clearly defines that if you're using an ng model, then it should have a name attribute attached to it. Now if you look at the elements, we can see that it doesn't have a name attribute attached to it. So let's put the name attribute. So I'm going to do a control click and just add name equals. Now this one is going to be name, this one is going to be email, and password and age. So I'll save this and see if the error is fixed. Now let the form reload, and as you can see, the errors are fixed now. Now you can also see that the models are getting populated into our form fields. So the models are directly getting shown over here. Now if you start editing it, the model gets updated and that's been printed on top of the screen. So that's basically about the models. Now let's add some validation into our form. So I can go ahead and take the HTML element, take the form element called name, and add this field called required. I can do it by giving simply required, or I can give required equal to true. Now when I come to the form and remove the name, if you can see, there is a red indication that this field is not valid. The red color is actually coming because of Angular material design. If you're using any other framework like Bootstrap, then you'll have to use, you'll have to have some code that gives you that error reporting there. So with Angular material, it's all done by its own, so we don't have to worry much about that. Now let's add a select box into our form, because a select box is very common inside every form. It has a drop-down list of it's basically a drop-down list of foods that I prefer. So let's give it a name called food. Now I have to create that variable property called food, which is basically going to be an array of string. So food is going to be type string, an array of type string. So let's add that first. Okay, so that's going to have an array of string which basically has Indian, Mexican, and continental. And now we have to set that up in the template. Okay, I think I have a small typo here. It should be food. So I'll just replace this. Now I'll save this and run the code, and I have a few errors. So this basically tells that I haven't imported mat select. So I'll go to the app module and import mat select module and copy that into our imports array and save this and go back to our browser and refresh the page. Now our select box does work fine. We have the listings here. Now the only thing that's pending here is that we don't have that binded to the model. So let's add that to the model first. So I'll go to user.ts and then add in the name of the food. So public food. Let's make it optional. Let's not make it optional. So if I put it over here, it gives and throws an error saying that optional parameters should be at the end. So I'll have to cut this and make food before age. So I'll copy that and paste it in here so that the syntax is correct. Now I'll save this and come over here and give the name of the food. Let's choose Indian for now. So I'll give Indian over here. The string should match, so I'll copy and paste it here. Save this and and come back to the browser. So you can see that it should be selected. For some reason it's not being selected. So let's go back to the browser and see what is a name. Okay, so that's because we haven't added an ng model here, so we'll go ahead and add ng model. So that's going to be user.food and save this and go back to the browser, reload the page, and you can see that Indian should be selected. Sometimes you want to give hint to the user, so basically you could Angular material provides you ways to do that. So you can create an element called mat hint and give the hint over here. Please enter your email address, please enter your username, and this will appear as a hint. So I'll save this. Now I'll just reload the page and I can see that below the username, I have the text, please enter your username. So that's very useful. Sometimes you can give error messages also. For example, there is another way by which you can give error messages. So mat error can be used for that. So I can copy that and paste it over here, and this would actually come up when there is an error. So if I remove the username from there, it's going to show up the error message there. So when I remove that, you can see that this field is required, error message is showing up. This has nothing to do with Angular forms, but if you're using material, then this is a very handy thing to do. So that's basically why I use material design. Now imagine you're not using material and you want to have those error printed out. And there is a way by which you can have that. Now if I inspect element, you can see that there are special classes called ng dirty, ng untouched, ng pristine, ng valid, and ng invalid. So there are special classes like that that gets attached to the input element when you make actions with the form. So this form right now is ng untouched. Now when you start typing in it, it becomes touched. So let's type something into it and just see what happens over here. Now you can see that this has an ng valid field and it's ng touched. So if you want to style this on your own, you can just target those classes and then write your own custom CSS. Now okay, so these are the 6 main classes that get attached: ng touched, ng dirty, ng pristine, ng valid, and invalid. So it's self-explanatory. There is nothing that needs to be explained. So you can just write your own class and then style it according to whatever you want. Okay, now the last thing to discuss in this is how we can submit the form. So you can first you have to create a reference of that form. So using the ng form directive, and then you can write an ng submit, which will call a function, and then that will get the data from the form. Now on submit will just console log this dot user, which is binded to the form. So any changes in the form will be changed, will be shown over here inside this dot user. So I'll just go here and click on the submit button, and you can see that the form values are console logged. So that's basically how we create a template driven model based form. There is another approach which is called the reactive form approach, which is totally different from this one. So we'll at the end of the next video, that is after we see what is a reactive form, we'll discuss when we should go with a template driven form and when we should go with a reactive form. So that's it for this video. I hope you learned something from this video. Thank you for watching this video. Have a great day. Bye.